الهيئة العامة للسياحة والآثار. ملتقى السفر والاستثمار السياحي.
Okay, I'm going to make a start. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Kenneth Wardrop, and I come from Edinburgh in Scotland in the United Kingdom. And I have a background in tourism development. All of my career has been in developing tourism destinations. And I have a particular interest in events and festivals and cultural tourism as a way of developing destinations. I was the Head of Economic Development with the City of Edinburgh Council for 5 years, and then latterly I was the Chief Executive of the City Promotion Body for Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland. And 4 years ago I became a freelance tourism consultant. Since 2008, I have been a visiting research fellow at Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and so I have some experience of academia as well. And in terms of events and festivals, I was responsible for Edinburgh's winter festivals for 5 years, which are the festivals that take place in December, around our Christmas and New Year celebrations. So today I'm going to talk to you about cultural tourism as a driver for destination economies, and I'm going to make a particular reference to Edinburgh as a case study. And Edinburgh is known as the world's festival city, so I think it's an excellent case study. And I think for people here in Saudi Arabia, which has got a developing festivals and events sector, there are good lessons to be learned from Edinburgh. So in this presentation I'm going to give a bit of a background in terms of a definition of events. I'm going to introduce different types of events and the growth and development of events. What do events and festivals bring to destinations? I'm going to consider the case study of Edinburgh's festivals. I'm going to look a little bit about living culture, something called intangible cultural heritage and tourism, and this arises from a piece of work that I've recently been doing in Scotland, looking at how we can make the most of our living culture and link that to the tourism industry. I'm going to briefly touch on the experience economy, which is one of the kind of trends shaping festivals and events, which leads me into the festival event industry trends and some consideration of some of the success factors that make good festivals and events for destinations. So just to start, and a bit of background. What needs that events satisfy? Primarily, they help in terms of affiliation and bonding, so bringing people together. Events generally are about an expression of shared cultural meaning, identification with a particular cultural group, expression of pride in a culture or group, marking special occasions, and I think that's one of the most important aspects of events, are about marking special occasions. They should be things that are out of the ordinary, that are beyond everyday life and everyday experience. Very particularly commemoration of historical anniversaries. Of course, here in Saudi, National Day is about commemoration of a historical anniversary. They can be about encouraging tolerance and diversity as well. Very much events and festivals can be used for education, for helping people understand their own culture, but also other educational messages. So a lot of festivals and events are built around educational messages. A good example being about, say, environmental sustainability or healthy living. They should be an expression and enjoyment of creativity, So good festival events are defined by being very creative. Of course, amongst festivals events you'll have sporting events, and they are about sporting prowess and competition. Needs they also satisfy the creation of economic benefit, and that's what I'm going to primarily talk about today. They can make a place an attractive place to live, work, study and visit. And again, if you look at some of the research that's taking place around the globe, the whole role of festivals and events in making places an attractive place to live is very well researched. And in terms of attracting people to come and live in a place, a good cultural life and cultural activities are a primary driver. They can be used for corporate promotion of goods and services. I've got a good example here today in this event, and obviously for individual entrepreneurial goals. So what are events? And this definition goes back to 1988. A special event is a one-off happening designed to meet specific needs at any given time. Local community events may be defined as an activity established to involve the local population in a shared experience to their mutual benefit. And this idea of a shared experience is very, very important. That's why people like events. So interesting enough, in this day and age of the internet and social media, people still like to go to festivals and events because of this shared experience, people coming together and you know, the coming together of people. So the emergence of the events industry. Second, why has the events industry become such an important aspect of tourism? And it is one of the fastest growing aspects of tourism is events-based tourism. And basically that's because people have recognised the economic importance of events, how they can be used for urban and rural regeneration, so how cities and regions are using events to create a reason for visit and as a stimulus for economic development. They can be used very, very effectively to disperse visitors around countries and destinations, so you can create a reason for visit and draw people to an area that people maybe previously haven't visited before. They're very, very important as part of the promotional tools for destinations, and they're very much part of the marketing mix of a destination. And so many people see events as part of the marketing, and often you'll find that the marketing organisation for a destination, the DMO, will also be responsible for events. So here the Saudi Commission for Tourism and Antiquities is one of the main supporters of new festivals and events here in Saudi Arabia. So events and festivals can be used as an opportunity to showcase destinations and raise their profile. So the trajectory that events and festivals have been on really started in the 1980s, and there was a rapid growth of the use of spectator sports events for strategic corporate hospitality. So that was a stimulus to the growth of a lot of sporting events. And we can see here some examples in the United Kingdom of Wimbledon, the Open Golf Championships and Grand Prix. Many people say that one of the defining changes in the events industry took place with the Los Angeles Olympic Games in 1984, which were the most commercial of the Olympic Games to date, and showed that relationship in terms of commercial sponsorship linked particularly to the use of television to reach a much wider audience, and the most effective use of TV to promote the Los Angeles Olympics. And that changed the whole nature of these big sporting events and brought in much more sponsorship. So the power of major sporting events to bring increased profile and economic benefits has been increasingly recognised. And again, one of the phenomena that we've seen over the last few decades has been the increasing competitive bidding for mega and major events, and particularly from emerging nations, which is again very much a trend that's happened in the last few decades. What we're also seeing is a blurring of the edges between different events. So if you think of the big sporting events that we now participate in and watch on our televisions, a huge aspect of those events now is a cultural focus. So if you think of the opening of the London Olympics in 2012, the ceremony, it was very much focused on the culture of the United Kingdom. And alongside the Olympic Games, there was a cultural Olympiad. So it was a cultural festival which ran for the whole year of the London Olympics. And what you hear people describing it as a festival of sport now. So it's about encouraging resident involvement and enhancing the image of the host community. So again, we can see a transformation in the way these big events are now staged. Events are now beginning to form part of government strategy. So this is again a big change. You see governments now setting out strategies, policies and agendas for the development of festivals and events. And also regional development agencies for urban and rural regeneration. So just looking around some of the stands here this afternoon, you can see that many of the areas that are developing in Saudi Arabia, within their development plans, they're including festivals and events as part of their strategy. So this is a big shift in terms of government involvement, government policy. So from 2000, we've seen across the globe a huge growth in the number of events that are taking place. And again, we've seen the emergence of particular government event agencies. And Australia really led the way with the creation of these event agencies, the first of which was the Events Corps in Western Australia. In Scotland, we have an organisation called Event Scotland, and I'll talk a bit about that later, which is very much about promoting the development of events in Scotland, and it sits alongside, Event Scotland sits alongside the National Tourism Organisation Visit Scotland. And of course, I mentioned the Saudi Commission for Tourism and Antiquities has its own events development fund and strategy here in Saudi Arabia. So one of the computer games festivals. So hobbies and leisure pursuits are one of the biggest growing areas of new events. And of course here in Saudi Arabia, flower festivals are very popular, as they are in other parts of the world too. And we get a lot of heritage-based events as well. So content or sector events, again different routes that events come from. So it may be community-based events, a cultural event. Most events, I would say, should be entertainment-based. There should be an element of entertainment and fun. Educationally based events, sporting, you may get political events, purely tourism-focused events, so there'll be things like the Jeddah Shopping Festival, would be a good example of that as an event or a festival which is totally focused on tourism. And then of course we get the meetings, incentive, conference and exhibition or business events. And also you get a lot of events that are not-for-profit or charity events. An important thing is that you understand who the key stakeholders are for your event. So who are the people that are involved in your event that you have to work with, that you need to work with. So an example here is from the Jeddah Tourism Festivals, and you can see the different stakeholders or partners that you would need to work with for events. From host organisation, the host community, government agencies, the audience. So my audience here tonight and people who are at this event are stakeholders in the STTIM event. Suppliers and media as well are also event stakeholders. So some definitions in terms of what events might be. The term special events has been coined to describe specific rituals, presentations, performances or celebrations that are consciously planned and created to mark special occasions and or to achieve particular social, cultural or corporate goals and objectives. So that in terms of giving you an idea of where events come from and the nature of events. Another definition of events is a unique moment in time celebrated with ceremony, ritual to satisfy specific needs. So again, an important aspect here is the fact that events are this unique moment in time. And that's a very defining characteristic of events, is that they are time bound. As I said earlier, they don't happen every day, they happen for a moment in time. And there is this element of celebration as part of it. A further definition is the one below, and this guy here, Donald Getz, who's from Canada, a very, very famous writer on events, probably the most prolific academic in terms of writing about festivals and events, says a special uniqueness which differentiated them from fixed attractions and their ambience which elevates them from the ordinary life. So it's this extraordinary thing. It's a special uniqueness, and it's not like a visitor attraction which is fixed. Events are constantly evolving, constantly changing, and there are absolutely of that moment in time. So even if you repeat the same event every year, no two events are ever the same. Partly because of the audience that attends, it may be the participants in terms of the musicians or the artists. So each event is always going to be different. So they're not like a visitor attraction which is static. So got some competition from outside, I think. So unique event. So this is a typology of events, and shows you that events are often measured on their scale or size. So you'll often hear people talking about mega events, and the true mega events in the world are the Olympics, the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, and expos. So here in the region, obviously, we're seeing the Dubai Expo in 2020, and Qatar hosting the World Cup in 2022. And again, that's one of the changing elements of and aspects of events, is a growth in the number of mega events that are happening in the emerging nations. And I know there are aspirations to bring the Olympics here to this region. Saudi Arabia has already talked about bringing the Olympics to Saudi Arabia. I know that Qatar is very keen to bring the Olympics to Qatar. So mega events are these large-scale events. They've got a global target audience for both participants and audience. And one of the defining aspects of a mega event is the fact that it attracts global media attention. Then the next tier down is special events. So again, a good example in the region is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and the Bahrain Grand Prix, which would be described as a special event or a major event. And they are world or regional sporting finals. The target audiences are world, continental, national, and again they attract media attention. Next down is what we call hallmark or signature events, which are generally hosted by big cities. It could be a national sporting final or event. The audience here is more likely to be national or regional rather than international, and it's only going to be of interest in national and local media. And then the bottom level are community-based events, which are much more localised, can often be rural. They're very community-focused. The target audience is regional, local, and the interest is from the local media. So this is how people define different types of events. A different definition here is cultural events, sporting events, business events, the three different sort of categories in terms of how people would typically define different kinds of events. And again, some examples here from the region. So looking at hallmark or signature events, which are probably most likely events here in Saudi Arabia that the Saudi Commission for Tourism and Antiquities is likely to promote, would be these hallmark or signature events, which is a major one-time or recurring event of limited duration, developed primarily to enhance awareness, appeal and profitability of a tourism destination in the short and or long term. And they rely on their success on their uniqueness, their status or their timely significance to create interest and attract attention. And people are very interested in signature or hallmark events because they are generally unique to that destination and they cannot be copied by other destinations. And for destinations, one of the key things that you're trying to achieve in the destination is differentiation and being a distinctive destination. You don't want to be like any other destination. You want to be a distinctly different and differentiated destination. So signature events or hallmark events are one way of achieving that for your destination. Special events and major events, a high status or prestige event that attracts a large crowd and wide media interest. Such events have a tradition and incorporate festivals and other types of events. They're expensive to stage, attract funds to the region and lead to demand for associated services and leave behind a legacy. And you hear people talking a lot about events, legacies. What does that event leave behind to the destination? And so this is a very, very important aspect of major or special events. And then of course we've got the mega events. Now this description was written in 1997, and you can see here that's about the fact that the definition was then that they should exceed 1 million visits. Their capital cost should be, at this time, was $500 million US. But of course, if we look at the London Olympics, it said it was spent US dollars 18 billion rather on the London Olympics. And the Sochi Winter Olympics in Russia, they say they spent 25 billion US dollars on the Sochi Olympics. So these are big, huge events, mega events, and there is a capacity issue for most countries in terms of their ability to actually stage and deliver such large-scale events because of the cost and that infrastructure that you need and the capability that you need to deliver something like that. Of course, you can see that the next Olympics are coming up in Rio de Janeiro in 2016, and of course Brazil in 2014 hosted the World Cup, and we saw that Russia hosted the Winter Olympics in 2014, and they're going to be hosting the next World Cup in 2018. So a lot of countries are investing very heavily in mega events as a way to position themselves as destinations. So what do events and festivals bring to destinations? They leverage, so they create economic benefit. They create benefit for the host community, the host country, or the host destination. And that benefit can be either economic, social, or cultural benefits to the communities. So you can see that very much in how they position the Rio World Cup in terms of the economic and social and cultural benefits that they were looking to derive from hosting the World Cup in Brazil. And obviously, when you look at the bid that Qatar put in to host the World Cup in 2022, it was very much looking at the social and cultural benefits that the World Cup will bring to Qatar. They can maximise profitability for local enterprises, and this thing called the multiplier effects. So that's how you spread the economic benefit of these big events through the whole of the economy of a region and a district. Create a favourable image and brand for a destination. And we can see that is one of the biggest drivers why countries are investing in events, is this repositioning and branding and creation of image for a destination. And it creates new and repeat tourism to a destination. So we can see that again looking at examples like the London Olympics, the effects after the Games in terms of visitors coming to the United Kingdom in subsequent years, having seen the event on television and got an impression of the destination through the event coverage. They're very, very good events at expanding traditional visitor season and spreading visitor demand geographically. Can attract foreign investors and foreign exchange earnings and dramatically increase the likelihood of international tourists returning to a destination. So for most destinations, what they're looking to try and achieve is what they call a portfolio of events. So they're trying to get a mix of different kinds of events in different size and scale. So they're looking to have some of these hallmark or special events. They're looking to have some major events in the mix. They're looking to have community events. And they're looking to have a mix of sporting, cultural, heritage, different kinds of events. So it's a very, very common thing now when you look at event strategies for destinations that they will have this portfolio, this mix of events. And it's no different here in Saudi Arabia when you look at what the Saudi Commission for Tourism and Antiquities, the events that they're supporting. They're trying to get this mix, this portfolio of events spread across the country and at different times of the year as well. So I'm now going to look at the case study of Edinburgh, which, as I said, one of the unique things about it is that the whole of this city centre is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And so it's a living city in a World Heritage Site. So you can see that drama of the beauty of the buildings and the setting, have been recognised by UNESCO as a World Heritage asset. One of the other things that Edinburgh is a World City of Literature. So it was designated as a UNESCO World City of Literature over 10 years ago, and it was the first city in the world to be designated as City of Literature. and there's now subsequent cities like Dublin is now a city of literature, for example, and Melbourne in Australia is another city of literature. So it's a city that's known for its cultural assets, its arts, its architecture, and its literature particularly. So the World Heritage Site, as I say, covers all of the centre of the city. So the journey that Edinburgh has been on in the last few decades is that is a growing destination in terms of attracting international visitors, and it's now the second city in the UK for international visitors after London, and we have 1.3 million international visitors and about 11 million day visitors and 2.5 million UK overnight visitors to the city. And that generates about $6 billion value to the city economy every year. And it represents a quarter of all of Scotland's tourism economy or visitor economy. So it's the UK's favourite city break destination. It's regularly voted by travellers as one of their favourite cities in the United Kingdom. It's also a very successful city as a business tourism destination for conferences, and it was in 2012 the 33rd in the world. I think in 2013 it dropped to 40th, but it's pretty good for a small city of 500,000 people. And it's also a very popular city for inward investment attraction. And again, the cultural life of the city, the cultural assets are very important for attracting inward investment. And I like this quote that says that as you walk out of the main railway station, it's probably the finest first impression about a city anywhere in the world in terms of its drama. So here's some images of the city. In the last decade, we've seen the city now being considered as a must-see European cultural capital city. So it's really established itself in terms of its cultural credentials based on its festivals and events and its different cultural assets. And one of the things that's kind of known for is its immersive experiences. And we'll talk about these when we talk about the whole development of the experience economy. So it's that combination of the history and heritage, but also it's known as a place for fine dining rather. It's got lots of really brilliant restaurants, more restaurants per head of population than any other UK city, and it's got the second number of Michelin-starred restaurants outside London in the UK. So it's known as a foodie city, a city for people who like to indulge in good food. So immersive experience are part of it. So the strategic context, all this hasn't happened by accident. The city has taken a very strategic approach to repositioning itself in the marketplace. And one of the key pieces of work was the Edinburgh 2020 tourism strategy, and Roger Carter, who's sitting in the audience, was involved in that project, putting together the new strategy for the city. And that links very much to the festivals strategy, which was last done in 2006 and is due to be refreshed, or is being refreshed this year. So we're updating the festival strategy, and it links very, very closely to this city strategy. The City Council has its own event strategy, which again has been refreshed at the moment, and then it sits within the national strategy for Scotland for the tourism industry, which is called Tourism Scotland 2020, and the event strategy for Scotland. So there's a very strong strategic framework that defines how the city is developing its cultural tourism offer, and a lot of thinking has gone into how we maximise the benefits of the culture for tourism development. So one of the creations, I should go back, in terms of this report here, Festivals Edinburgh report in 2006, was the recognition that they needed to create an overarching body to bring together all of the major festivals. And they created an organisation called Festivals Edinburgh, which is an umbrella organisation, a partnership organisation that brings together all 12 of the major festivals in Edinburgh. And I think it's one of the best case studies globally in terms of representing the power of and value and benefit of partnership and collaboration between festival organisations. I also worked with other organisations, Festivals Edinburgh, including the Scottish Government, the Edinburgh Tourism Action Group, which is the body that brings together the tourism industry, and it works very closely with the British Council to promote Edinburgh's festivals globally and to ensure that international and global dimension to the major festivals. So there are 12 major festivals. The Thundering Hooves report I talked about, Festivals Impact Study I'll talk about in a minute, which is a very good piece of work in terms of understanding the benefits and value of festivals that's applicable anywhere, I think, in terms of understanding the role that festivals play. One of the key things about the festivals is the fact that they've lasted so long. They're coming up for their 70th anniversary of the Edinburgh International Festival, which started in 1947, and also the Fringe Festival, which is the largest arts event in the world now. We'll see that in a minute. And the fact that the Edinburgh's festivals have become a global brand. Many people have heard of the Edinburgh Festival, so the projection of the image of Edinburgh around the world has been amplified by the 12 major festivals. People tend to talk about the festival when they talk about the summer festivals, but in fact there's 6 concurring festivals running in the summer. And the city's population doubles in the period from the end of July to the beginning of September. So we go up from 500,000 people to 1 million people in the city for that 5 to 6 week period every year. And those people are coming from around the globe. So some information on the International Festival. So as I say, it started in 1947, the International Festival, so it's coming up for its 70th anniversary. There were 2,400 artists in 2014 from 43 different countries, an audience attendance of 415,000 people over the sort of 4-week duration of the festival, and it generated itself 4.67 million in ticket sales, while the festivals themselves draw about 4 million people to enjoy the 6 summer festivals. The tickets went on sale this weekend for the 2015 Edinburgh International Festival, and they had record-breaking sales. They sold £2/3 of a million pounds worth of tickets in 2 days on Saturday and Sunday for this year's festival. So huge interest. The Fringe Festival started because some performers couldn't get into the main programme for the International Festival, so they decided just to come anyway and stage their own shows, and it became known as the Fringe Festival. So it's at the side of the International Festival, but it has actually grown to be much bigger than the International Festival. And this is a quote from Kath Mainland, who is the Chief Executive of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. And it says, once again, audiences from Edinburgh, Scotland and the UK and across the globe have been exposed to a completely fantastic cultural experience over the last 25 days. Performers, writers and artists have given their all on stages across Edinburgh in a truly international celebration of culture and entertainment. The important thing about the Fringe and the ethos of the Fringe is that it's a totally uncurated festival, so that nobody decides what the programme's going to be, which makes it pretty unique in the world, and is much copied now by other places. So basically, if you have a story to tell or a performance that you want to put on, you can find a venue, which can be a challenge in Edinburgh during the festival, willing to host it, then you can put on your show. So nobody decides that your show is in or out. Everybody can put on their show, so it makes it a unique event. They sold over 2 million tickets in 2014, and that was an increase of 12% on the year before, and that generated itself 5.3 million of US dollars worth of ticket sales. There were nearly 50,000 performances, over 3,000 shows in over 200 venues, And the venues range from people's front living rooms in their house to old shops, to theatres, to the open air. And they came from 51 countries around the world. And the one thing, definitely the Fringe is not boring. It's one of the most exciting and dynamic and avant-garde arts experiences you'll experience anywhere in the world. It's also an industry showcase for spotting talent. So they have over 1,000 arts industry professionals. So these are talent scouts, people looking for the next big act, the next big performer. So it also acts as a trade show for the arts sector, as well as an entertainment for the audiences that come. And they also attract the world's media. So they will have over 1,000 accredited journalists from 41 different countries come to the Fringe every year to experience the latest in art entertainment. Just before I leave the Fringe, one of the things about the Fringe, I would say, is because of that creative nature of the Fringe and that artistic performance and firmament that there is, it constantly redefines the Edinburgh brand. And it's one of the reasons that Edinburgh has been so successful as a destination and a brand, is the fact that the Fringe particularly each year redefines the brand image of Edinburgh because of the very cutting edge nature of the arts and cultural experience that you have in Edinburgh. And so it's a kind of defining factor of Edinburgh's strength as a destination. In 2011 or 2010, in terms of research, it gives a huge amount of insights into terms of the benefits that can be derived from festivals and events for a destination. And you can easily access the whole report is online. And the key findings in terms of the economic impacts are quite astounding. And basically they demonstrated that the 12 festivals generated nearly $300 million worth of additional tourism revenue for Edinburgh in 2010. And that kind of blew people away. It kind of really astounded them in terms of the scale of the impact of that, the festivals on the city. And that represented across Scotland $388 million in total for Scotland. It demonstrated it supported over 5,000 full-time jobs. And the very interesting thing, again, for any destination, and particularly here in Saudi Arabia, in terms of where that economic impact went, and it showed that over a third was accrued to accommodation providers, about a third went to food and drink establishments, 6% went to shopping and retail, and 9% of spend went on transport. So very important in terms of understanding how festivals events, the effects trickle down and ripple out through a destination. You can see that where people's visitors' spend actually went. And this research has been very, very powerful for the festivals in arguing with government and other agencies and sponsors in terms of the value of the festivals and why they should be supported and people should invest further in those festivals. So a very, very powerful piece of what we would call advocacy data and evidence to present the case for the value of Edinburgh's festivals. So one of the important things about the festivals is that people would assume that the festivals are supported by the international visitors. But again, interesting for here in Saudi Arabia, you can see that the majority of the visitors actually come from Edinburgh itself, 41%. And from Scotland, you're talking about over half, so you're at 56% come from Edinburgh and the rest of Scotland. So primarily it is a domestic market that underpins the festival, and this is very important for its sustainability, and that explains partly why it's lasted so long, that it's the local people who support the festival and events. So it's not just about bringing in international visitors, it's making sure that the local population really are engaged in supporting the festivals and events. 16% are from overseas though, so it does bring a big economic benefit from international visitors. And remember, that's across all 12 festivals. So some of the festivals have more attraction for domestic visitors and others have more attraction for international visitors. So something like the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo has more international visitors than it does domestic visitors, for example. And something like Hogmanay, the New Year celebration, brings in a lot of international visitors compared to something like the Science Festival, which is much more locally visitor based. A great thing about the impact study, it really showed about the positive impact that the festivals actually had on Edinburgh residents in terms of changing how they perceive their destination, their city. And you can see here that in terms of increasing the sense of local pride in the city, encouraging access to the arts, encouraging residents to take risks in terms of the kind of performances that they went to. They promote a confident, positive Scottish identity, one of diversity and openness. So again, for any destination, this is good data, good evidence of the power of festivals in terms of impacting on local residents and changing perceptions. And similarly for overseas visitors, it says here that 96% of people felt that festivals are part of what makes Edinburgh special as a city. So it's defining the brand, it's defining the destination, it's defining the place. And again, the festivals make it more likely to visit. 82% of people said it would be more likely to visit the city again because of the festivals. So I mean, actually 47% of all visitors to Edinburgh are repeat visitors. So it draws people back again and again to the destination. And again, this is one of the powerful aspects of festivals and events, that ability to bring visitors back on repeat visits and bring them back again and again. So again, a lot of studies in the world showing the importance of culture in terms of shaping the image of a place. And if you've never read this guy here, Simon Antholt, if you're interested in destination development, Simon Antholt is a really prolific writer on destination branding. And he's very much showing that the importance of culture, a component absolutely necessary to make the image of any place properly satisfying. So again, the Edinburgh Festival very much shaping how people perceive Edinburgh as a destination in a very positive way. So in summary about Edinburgh's festivals, it's a major economic, social and cultural driver, constantly refreshing, the repositioning Edinburgh brand. They have mature pulling power, so the fact they've been around since 1947, they are actually have mature pulling power. It helps Edinburgh punch above its weight as a destination, and very much now being used as a vehicle for cultural diplomacy. And we see lots of countries around the world now using festivals and events for cultural diplomacy. I'm briefly going to talk about cultural tourism and living culture, intangible cultural heritage. And UNESCO has focused greatly recently on cultural heritage and intangible cultural heritage. And it's recognising that cultural heritage is not just about the built environment, but it's elements such as our oral traditions, the performing arts, rituals, knowledge and practice concerning nature and the universe, and skills to produce traditional crafts. And again, we can see this here in the exhibition outside in terms of how intangible cultural heritage has been used to promote destinations. This is a very important and interesting piece of work here, this study on tourism and intangible cultural heritage. So if you're interested in understanding how you can use intangible cultural heritage, I would recommend reading this report by the UNWTO. And in February this year, for the first time, the UNWTO and UNESCO held their first world joint conference on tourism and culture in Cambodia. So very much an emerging area of interest, that linking of living culture and tourism. And I've done a lot of work on this in Scotland, and again you can see how you can use it very much to help develop tourism. There's a lot of sensitivities around it though. You don't want to undermine the intangible cultural heritage, the living culture, and compromise it. But I think through good partnership working between the two sectors, we can find a way where we can mutually benefit one another. One of the things that does help is give that differentiation, that distinctiveness to a destination, the intangible cultural heritage. It gives that uniqueness. This awful word that people talk about in terms of authenticity. So authenticity, it gives an authentic feel to a place. And again, we live in a homogenised global environment. We all have lots of similar brands. I noticed a Starbucks today when we were driving around Riyadh. So people, when they're travelling, are looking for that distinctive, different, unique, authentic experience. So the intangible cultural heritage is one of those ways that you can create that definition, that differentiation, that distinctiveness in your destination. So Scotland very much focusing on festivals and events, and a statistic here that I like, that in Scotland we've over 400 festivals took place in 2014, so that's not an untypical year. And the Scottish Government, through Events Scotland, the National Events Agency, has been promoting different themed years. So they've set out for the next few years different themes. So this year is a year of food and drink in Scotland. Next year is innovation, architecture and design, then history, heritage, archaeology, and then a year of young people. And again, what living culture, the work we've done in Scotland, showing that it's a great way of bringing people together and creating that interaction between visitors and the local community. And visitors say that one of the things that they like about Scotland, and one of the things that makes their visits so successful and wants them to come back again, is the positive nature of that interaction. So again, if you're thinking about what visitors and tourists are looking for now in the 21st century, they are looking for that engagement with the local community, that authentic, real, living it like a local experience, and that engagement with local people to get a real sense of place. So the experience economy, which again is one of the strong drivers now that's shaping festivals and events and also shaping the tourism industry, is all about that bringing together of people and creating an experiential, or creating experience basically. And again, if you're interested in experience economy, Pine and Gilmer are probably the most prolific writers in this. And it's looking at theatre and everyday business as a stage. So it's how you enhance the experience, the visitor experience, and give it that uniqueness. And it's about creating fulfilment, rejuvenation, and engagement. So there's Pine and Gilmer have this very famous model in terms of what they call the 4 realms of an experience. And the nature of experience and how it's created. And festival and events are very much about this, in terms of creating that distinct, unique experience and that engagement between the audience and performers and the event. And so it's this mutually compatible domains that commingle to form a uniquely personal encounter. So they help create that personal encounter in a destination, festivals and events. And the different elements are absorption and active participation and immersion. These are all things that you're looking to achieve in your visitor destination. I believe that festivals and events are one of the key ways of achieving that, in terms of creating the sort of entertainment, the education, that sort of escapism, and also the aesthetic at the same time. So I'm conscious of time and kind of running out of time. So some of the trends that are influencing events. Significant growth in events due to an increase in international communities, emergence of festival culture. So again, you can see this as a global phenomenon, that people have this habit now of going to festivals. So there is this festival culture. Growth in venues, people creating venues to host events. And an increase in trend towards a more competitive marketplace. Issues for the business events include the need to focus on stakeholders and focus on the environment and the importance of risk management and increased competition for event audiences. And you can see that even here in Saudi Arabia. Look at the big programme of events that there are. There is a lot of competition now for event audiences. So the events that you stage have to be of the highest quality to actually achieve that, to attract the audience. Other kind of characteristics are changing work patterns. So people are working different work patterns now, which makes it more difficult for them to attend events. A changing demographic. So here in Saudi Arabia, like many countries, we've got an ageing population, a much more urban population now, which again defines the kind of events that people want to go to and attend. The demands of urban living and competition that there is for people's leisure time are one of the driving factors in terms of shaping events. So many of us are time poor now, so we're looking to use the time that we have in the most efficient way in terms of the kind of events and festivals and how we use our leisure time. Okay, and some of the regional trends there are, obviously you can see around the region a lot of big events taking place. So there's a more mature events market developing in the region. There's an increase in the capacity and the capability in the region for events. And obviously there's a lot of competition for Saudi Arabia in terms of, from near neighbours in terms of events that are being hosted. Some factors of success, and again this, if you're interested, these guys here, Richards and Palmer, very interesting writing in what defines good, successful events. But context, local involvement, very important you have that local involvement to sustain your event. Working in partnership, very powerful, and again the Edinburgh Festival showing the power of working in partnership. Strong content, absolutely essential, and good communication and marketing, some of the things that I would highlight there. I'm not going to look at that slide there. So Future of Festival Events, I like this slide because it was written in 1995, so it was written 20 years ago, but the message is still the same. Many festivals that do not stay fresh and modernise are likely to go out of existence. Competing for event audiences whose expectations continue to rise will require new management strategies and an emphasis on service quality. And I've recently contributed to a book on using Edinburgh as a case study in terms of how you build cultural entrepreneurship and use festival events as a driver of destinations. So quite a lot to cover there, covered. Hopefully it resonates with some of the experience you have here in Saudi Arabia in terms of delivering your own festivals and events, and inspires you to continue as you're doing to develop good festivals and events as creating a reason for visit, helping to promote the different regions and destinations here in Saudi Arabia, and and to see some of the benefits that come for festivals and events. Happy to take any questions if there's any questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?
I had a wonderful journey to Suffolk between 2011 and 2013.
Yes.
And I was lucky to write my dissertation on the Olympic Games.
Oh, yeah.
Multicultural Olympics and sports. But my question is, I saw that the basic impact of the economic factors was, the impact was more focusing on the economic and sporting factors, not the cultural Olympic.
Yeah.
Is it still anything cultural Olympic?
Yeah, the Cultural Olympiad was a very strong aspect of the London Olympics. And Edinburgh actually benefited from that. We had quite a number of big shows that were on during the summer of 2012 in Edinburgh. I don't know if anybody has done an actual study in terms of the Cultural Olympiad and what the benefits actually were to the different regions of the UK, different parts of the UK. The great thing about the Cultural Olympiad was it spread the Olympics out of London and got round some of this criticism there was that it was all concentrated in London. And it also created an excitement and an engagement with the Olympic Games across the whole of the country in a way that the Olympics couldn't do themselves. The only other thing they did with the Olympics was take the Olympic torch around the UK, which again had a great way of engaging all of the community in the enjoyment of the Olympics and feeling part of the Olympics. But it was deemed to be a great success, the Cultural Olympiad, in terms of the audiences that attended and the profile it raised. But as far as I'm aware, there was no actual economic impact assessment undertaken of it. So, was that the kind of question that you were asking? Yeah. Yeah, well, there's not the legacy. There's not really been a legacy from the Cultural Olympiad. There's a lot of debate about the legacy of the actual sporting aspect of the Olympics as well. Studies in terms of the continued engagement in sport and participation in sport. There's very mixed studies in terms of whether it has had that benefit. But no, I don't think the benefit of the Cultural Olympiad has been a legacy. I can't see any evidence of that. It was a kind of one-off thing. So yeah. Okay. Thank you. Time's out. Yeah. Happy to speak to people outside. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Where am I looking here? Am I not looking anywhere?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, that last one more. Thank you very much.
I'll give